The following 11 items are the most commonly marked items on driving test sheet. Slowing down significantly before you change lanes or when you merge is one of the most commonly marked items on a driving test sheet. Try not to brake too much unless there's a car in front of you that you're trying to fit behind. If you are well within the speed limit, you shouldn't be slowing down. If there's a vehicle in front of you, it would make sense to slow down just to make sure that you don't get too close. The minimum following distance in Australia is 2 seconds behind any vehicle. So here is what's important to know. When you intend to change lanes, indicate to let people know what you're doing. Pay close attention to the mirror. If there's nobody at that particular time about to pass you, look over your shoulder. Once you've checked your blind spot, start to diverge. Also, do the secondary check to follow up on traffic that was behind you to see how fast they are catching up. The second most commonly marked items on a driving test sheet is locking your eyes on one spot while reversing. Just try to change your viewing angle at least about 2.5 seconds or so. Here is one of the unusual items that gets marked quite a lot on the test sheet. Changing lanes on the sharp bend. If you intend to change lanes on a sharp bend, and if you're about to check your blind spot and you're still turning, you will lose the perspective of trajectory of your vehicle. So it's best to change lanes when the road is straight or relatively straight. So avoid changing lanes when the road is curving, because that's going to take your eyes off your trajectory. Your perspective will obviously change when you look over your shoulder. Even if it's for 1 second, it might have a significant impact on your path. Fast turns, especially left sharp turns in Australia, because we drive on the left-hand side, and if you're turning into a tiny street on the left-hand side, it would be about 90-degree angle or even a little bit sharper sometimes. Synchronize your steering ratio with your speed. Often people think that they struggle with the ability to turn properly, but the problem is your speed, because the faster you move, the faster you will have to turn your steering, and quite often people misjudge the turn and their speed, and as a result they go partially to 2 lanes. They can't stabilize the car. Also, when you're finishing your turn, don't rush accelerating, so start to generate your speed gradually but not suddenly. School zones and road works. Often people don't understand the seriousness. If it says 40, it's got to be 40. You can't go 46, 47. People think, oh, it still felt pretty slow, but you've got to be literally on 40. It would defeat the purpose of driving assessment if they just let you off for doing 50 in the 40 zone. You've got to reduce the speed before the sign that states 40 kilometers an hour, and you would have to maintain the speed within the 40 kilometers an hour until you reach the sign stating otherwise. So don't increase your speed 20, 30, 40 meters before the sign states that it's the end of roadworks or school zone. This one's a big one. People often fail because they don't give way while reversing. This happens quite often in the exercise left something behind. As you are reversing out of a driveway, you got to understand that if there's a car coming from behind, you've got to give way. So it's a simple rule: reversing traffic always gives way. Often I get asked, so should you go back in the driveway or back into your parking bay if there's a car? Not necessarily. You just freeze there, stop and let them pass you. Exception, if there's a rubbish truck, for example, holding up traffic from the opposite direction and reversing out of a driveway, it is a good idea to pull back into the driveway, allow the traffic to flow to overtake the truck, and then continue your maneuver. Here's another one: holding the indicator switch for too long or too early. When you're steering, regardless of whether your indicator switch is on the left or the right side, your hand will be roughly around that spot. For example, if you're exiting roundabout, when you finish turning right, you just flick it left and leave it for at least 3 seconds worth of blinking. If you want to change lanes and you are driving through a school zone or roadworks, ensure that you don't exceed the speed limit. Naturally, when we want to change lanes, we would increase the speed slightly. But in the 40 zone, if you're trying to rush to the next lane, it's very likely that you're going to go over the speed limit. Here is the big one, positioning the vehicle incorrectly when you're turning. If you're turning right, you would move closer to the center. For example, you're turning at a T-junction. Imagine there's a line dividing the two directions. Don't cross over the line, so pretty much position it straight. If you're turning left, you've got to follow the curb as it bends. Sometimes people do things wrong right at the end of the driving assessment. For example, they're parking forward back at the driving test center and the car is creeping forward slowly. They grab the gear knob to change to park position. Don't touch the knob before your vehicle has completely stopped. I had a call the other day and this young gentleman says that it was a bit harsh that the assessor failed him because he's changed gears while the car was moving extremely slowly. Imagine some cogs that move in one direction. That's in drive gear. To go to park position, you would have to go through reverse gear. So just imagine that the cogs for a moment start to turn the other way. So that might be abrupt for your transmission. Stop the vehicle completely before you select park position. Entering a slip lane to turn, often driving test candidates cross the solid white line when they get into the slip lane to turn, thinking that they might open an angle slightly. Maybe you would if you're driving a truck with a trailer, but not with a small car or a sedan or any passenger's car. So make sure that you remain within the added lane that's provided for turning. You don't have to hook outwards to be able to turn right properly. It's better to keep it slightly closer to the right hand side. As long as you don't hit the curb, that's fine. Crossing solid unbroken line in any situation will always be an immediate fail. Let me know if I've missed anything. As always, feel free to ask any relevant questions in the comment section below. Thanks for watching and I'll catch you next time.